or are we gonna accept a bond if someone did it again? I think you might just wanna carve out even in the definitions, what's, what we're willing to accept on bond.
Well, we started with cash, so.
That might be worth even
Probably
less.
take it on.
But that's why we went back to review it every 2 years,
Yeah.
because we just don't know.
Right.
But
And that and,
Well, what's your suggestion? We can put that in there. Right now, it just says, it gives you the option of cash deposit, irrevocable bank letters of credit, or a bond in the form approved by the township attorney. Do you want an indication that it has to be a bond rated of no less than a,
Yep, triple rated, I would do triple rated. That's gonna get rid of all of the mom and pops and maybe with, Hartford and Travelers and whoever else. There was a note on this one, this is for that 30 days is coming up. Where it says like the decommissioning responsible parties, and it's got within 30 days. And there was a note over here that said the PC, technically,
Yeah,
we
that was
only
my
represent
note.
quarterly.
The planning commission only meets every 3 months, so I wondered if, rather than designating the planning commission, it could be the zoning administrator, or the supervisor of the township board.
I would rather see the, take the township planning commission out, the township board in there.
I think it
Maybe
needs,
monthly.
yeah, monthly, and technically, I think they have a bigger hammer.
Fine. I did have one other, just about decommissioning, paragraph G. It's this was a change that was made at the last meeting. The sound level meter shall be used with the fast meter response and sampling frequency of 10 samples per second. I've done a little research on this, and I don't know that that's even possible, but even if it is it really necessary to have a reading of more than 1 per second?
There's 1,500 little points. Now, I had this explained to me. There's 1,500 little points, and if you do 1 sample per second, it is essentially averaging. If you do 10 samples per second, it picks up infrasound, which has been a big concern. And so I would leave that instead of your opinion to a sound expert, and not mine either.
I'm just questioning if it's feasible. Great, I
We
couldn't
put it
find
in,
any
if it's
place where
not
it
feasible,
was.
well, then the sound guy will, expert will tell us it's not, okay? I think, that's my opinion. Anybody else?
I'm working with an acoustical engineer, so I'll ask the question.
it'd be great because the board has authorized that, get to hire a.
I got access to a freebie one, so,
It was, that's, I called someone in because I didn't understand.
and
That,
then,
that was from that Robert Raymond, whatever.
On, item C, the last, the last sentence, security is based on, per turbine cost to be backed by owner's assets, operator's assets, or parent company. Owner, is that owner of the project or owner, landowner?
well, it would be the responsible party, so it's the applicant or
So
whoever it
it's
is.
not the landowner.
And it's the owner of the
So,
system.
how does this work if one project does the development and then it's turned over to DEE, Consumers Energy, whoever it goes to? How does that work? I mean, is this
That's a
only,
good question, and that's why we adopted that definition of responsible party at the last meeting. To
okay,
make it clear that whoever has the legal ability to do these things, every party in the matter is jointly and severally liable
confusion with these guys, that there's
got
a
it written
back
down.
door for consumers energy or something else that says, oh, wait a second, we're a utility, we're exempt from that. Is there any other laws behind that we're not seeing in that transaction?
At this point, there's not, because the Michigan Public Service Commission hasn't seen fit to regulate those aspects of wind energy development. Now, there's things they do get involved with, this is not one, they haven't set state standards for noise or shadow flicker or anything like that. There's always the prospect, and this has been an unfortunate, if you keep track of Township news, it's a constant fight that the MTA is fighting of the state stepping in and taking over zoning of whether it's mining, cell towers, and,
Well, they already trumped us on the 5G.
well, the Telecom Act, which is federal, severely limits, local authority on those items. So the answer is no right now, but is there any guarantee in the future that there could become an upswelling of, at a state or federal local level, that they want wind energy deployed more, and feel that local governments are standing in the way, if they don't change state or federal laws to say, you guys are out of the picture. That is always a possibility, but, there's nothing you can do about that, proactively. Superior levels of government can do that.
Time to milk the chickens.
Do we need to change anything in Board of Trustees in the zoning ordinance? Are we gonna make a note for, under their responsibilities, we've got 12, 13, and 17, but if we move the designation for enforcement to the board away from the planning commission, do we need to capture that?
Which one are you?
Back to the one we talked about before that Paul brought up, it's on
No.
page 35.
This is just one particular activity that we're designating to the board, and that
Okay.
you can have a one-off like that, that
Gotcha.
doesn't need any other collateral changes.
Receiving and forwarding complaints. So is this one that we're asking for a prepayment of $20,000 for a complaint that may or may not ever happen?
What
Am I
number?
reading this right? It's on page 37, the post-construction monitoring, and then there's a complaint resolution. Item 9A. And then does that have anything to do with the civil and municipal matter that you guys are talking about offside of us?
Yeah, those are different things. You're right, they have to put 20,000 down and keep it there, and yeah, if there's no complaints ever, then it just sits there in perpetuity, that's what they're required to do. Now, that's different than what you're talking about, this isn't for a violation. If they violated the ordinance, the zoning ordinance does set what the
Right.
fines per day are for violations. More compelling in this section of the ordinance is you have the ability to require them to shut down an operation of a particular turbine that's not operating in compliance, which is a bigger hammer than throwing a $250 fine at one of those companies.
But is this only if someone complains?
This is specifically to deal with third-party companies.
Which, this whole complaint thing is a lot better than where we started, because that was to keep a log and address them annually.
Oh, jeez.
That's not,
Yeah, that's not even close to.
no, that's like, no.
So if a complaint's filed and it's remedied, you've got investigation of complaints, it's within 30 days. So do we have a carve out for what happens if in fact there's a complaint and they remedy it? And no action, none of this other following action is needed?
it doesn't spell out what happens if it turns out that the complaint is, unverified, if you will, but, I don't know that you need to say anything, I mean, that they'll just get, the permit will just stay in effect and they can operate.
So the $20,000 for the purpose is to pay someone we hired to go investigate it?
Yes. You could draw on that to, investigate complaints.
So then you're re-triggering another public hearing, and we have to,
Well, it says may, you don't have to.
okay. And is the intention that should we need to do that, all of the costs for the bid advertisement, the cost of running that public hearing would all be taken out of that $20,000?
Yes, that's correct.
So, item number 12 in section 3, it has post-construction documentation within 6 months. I don't know that they've been able to do that within 6 months.
I don't know on that one. That was at the recommendation of, the Spicer group who originally put together the first draft.
Yeah, I think the post-construction documentation, they've been able to do some things, but the mapping and all of that is just really lagging behind. Cause sometimes you get temporary sign off, right? And then they're waiting for as-built conditions to come in later before they get final. And what flagged it was the GIS portion that's hanging up there, so
I don't have practical experience with that with knowing how long it actually takes to do that, so leave that up to your discussion.
we've given them 12 months for all the other closeouts.
Well, this is for each individual tower, not the whole project.
So this is only well, now I'm confused, cause under 10, which is compliance, B is nuisance complaint, C is non-nuisance.
12 is saying as they complete each tower, the township needs to have as-built drawings for that facility.
So is the thought that we're gonna review every single as-built for every single tower and then go back to whether it's the county clerk's office, whether it's DOT, wherever it is, and get alignment that it's deemed complete on a piecemeal, or are we getting a project at the very end?
Well, presumably if it's done on CAD, we'll be able to have
At the
the
end,
entire project at the end. But the idea was that the township should know as each tower is completed, where that thing is located, the depth of the footings and foundation, all of the details related to that specific facility.
okay, so you want as-built within 6 months, regardless of whether or not the tower is energized. So we can really see setbacks
Once
in
it's
all of those.
constructed.
Okay. I'm gonna just make a note that that's not necessarily energized.
Any other discussion on the wind energy ordinance? Paul, you got some homework to do? If we're done talking on the wind energy ordinance, Mr. Olson, you can come back up and join the committee back. That concludes the, stuff on the agenda, except for the last public comment we've got.
Something I can do, new business. I think actually a few things. One is the subject that came up at the Douglas Township meeting, was the fact that, got a few things that need to be corrected on our actual old ordinances. Right now, on page 24, there's, the height restrictions for the residents is 24 feet. And, then they've got the height restriction for an outbuilding is only 20 feet. So, we've had like 6 different, residents that are trying to build a pole barn next to their house, and it can't be the same height as their house. So, to me, and the other board that does the review came to me and said, cause I was there at that meeting, they're like, you gotta go back to your board and say, hey, you can't have the outbuilding, which is separate from the house, to be 20 feet height restriction compared to the house can be 24, cause that's not even gonna look right. If you're, you know, if you put the garage here and the house is here, it's just not gonna make any sense. So I don't know what you all think about that idea, but we've had 6 of these complaints in the last year on this one subject.
You understand what he's talking about, Paul?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm actually surprised that the height limit on a house is 24 feet. 35 is almost universal.
That's what I thought, but the problem is we've got some lake houses that we've put it at 24 feet, and we've just basically stuck with it for years.
And that's township wide, all districts?
You can look at it in page 24, it says 24 feet,
Well, that
and
would
that's
be,
low density.
that would be one solution, is to
Raise
increase the dwelling height. And again, it's not uncommon for accessory buildings to be limited to 14 to 16 feet. That can accommodate a pole barn. But I think that's probably why this seems a little out of whack, because your heights are unusual.
I think first of all, they're kind of low,
We should probably review that.
so I mean, you all understand what I'm saying, basically?
Yeah, it's the
At least
lake
they have the 2
resident,
buildings the same height.
Right.
It's just lake residential.
it's the lake residential that he's talking
Not all
about.
districts, okay.
So that kind of springboards it, is that really part of our master plan that was supposed to be reviewed last year? Could we capture all of these miscellaneous items and kind of clean these things up all at the same time as we do the master plan, which was next on the list?
I can't answer that, I wasn't part of the master plan.
Exactly.
Typically, the master plan review is taking a little broader look at land use issues. It's not usually a deep dive into the zoning, although, under state law, the master plan has to include what they call a zoning plan, but usually that's just a comparison of your future land use designations with your zoning districts to see, if you have, if the master plan is showing an area for agriculture, the zoning plan would show that you have an ag rural residential zoning district where agriculture is allowed, that kind of thing. If there's a disconnect, the most common one I see is where the master plan will recommend an area for mixed use development, which is becoming fairly common in many communities. But when you look at the zoning ordinance, there is no district that allows for a mix of uses, other than maybe planned unit development. Cause it's either residential or commercial or industrial, and they don't allow for blending. So that kind of thing would be pointed out in the zoning plan and the master plan, but it wouldn't typically get into looking at details like height limits and that sort of thing.
So I guess, Todd, my question is, there's things that I found that are like in violation of fire code and some other things.
Yeah.
For some reason, elementary students don't need to be on a primary road, whether the building's trickled or not, but high schoolers do, so I don't know which student has more value. So I think there's just some housekeeping. My question to the commission is, do we take these list of items along with the master plan, we're working on wrapping up the ordinance, and have that be the next checklist to clean those items up? And I don't think there's anything that prevents us from having more conversation than just the typical master plan,
Right.
if we wanted to modify and clean these other items up.
Yeah, we can make basically a few amendments, that's what we've done before.
I mean, I think if all of us have a whole checklist of items we wanna look at, we can probably get through them pretty quick.
Yeah, and then the other one is the lady that came back the last meeting, she wanted to build a house that was 550 square feet. You know, I mean, we're sitting at 750. I mean, I don't understand, if it's their land, you know, and it's a nice structure, why can't it be, you know, the small home thing is becoming popular. I'm actually thinking about it myself, but anyways, it's like, I mean, 550 square feet seems small to some of us, but to these people, it's their property, it's their land, it's a neat little house, it's custom built by, you know, some of them are Amish, some of them are custom builders.
Well, I think we've
That
also
was on
got,
my list too.
I mean, yeah, see what I'm saying, I mean, it's like.
Yeah, that's not
I mean, so
right.
you can have a, you know, single wide trailer that's, you know.
I mean, it could be a nanopad, that they wanna be close but not right there, so I think that those are all valid points that we need to look at on
And
this
then
side.
the other one is, we don't have anything that accommodates, you know, pole barn living. We don't have, they call them the what do they call it, the barn?
Barndominiums?
Yeah, so we don't allow anybody in our township to have a pole barn and then having living, you know, inside that.
So like an accessory dwelling unit?
Well, no, it's basically now it's a house, you know, there's the living quarters, but then there's a big door that's off to the side that you bring
Oh,
all your.
okay, so that is the dwelling.
Yeah,
unit.
basically, it's all one.
Yeah, you build a pole barn and you put an apartment in it, you
Yeah.
finish.
Is that really how you ask the question, if you say it's really a residential structure, but the barn part's accessory use?
Well, I guess I'd have to look at the ordinance, but, you know, I guess you might look at it as you have a large garage attached to your house, even though the dwelling is above the garage, not next to it, but, technically, that may be permitted. I mean, like I say, I'd have to look at the ordinance.
And then
More complicated issues with this there is the building code compliance.
Yeah.
I'll bring those up next time, but I do have two violations that I wanted to bring up to the board and see if I can get your input on this really quick. I know we're all tired, but, out at Clifford Lake, there's a gentleman that has, installed a, propane filling station, and we've never addressed it. I've actually talked to Dave about it, but, we've got a couple people that are willing to sign the complaint, but he feels that, we need board unanimous vote on this for him to enforce it. What it is, so I can show you some pictures if you'd like. It's basically the resident at Clifford Lake put in a 1,000 gallon filling station that he can fill RVs and propane tanks, things like that. And then he has additional 2,000 gallon capacity right near it. He's got a total of 3,000. And I was in the propane business for 10 years, and with 3,000 gallons, if that ever had a structural fire or anything like that, everything, and I can show you videos, everything within basically, 200 feet, all the windows are shattered. And this gentleman never came to this board, never asked for a permit, never went to the county, and the residents, we've talked about it, it's actually a hazard to the people, and we need Dave's, support to support him to pursue this investigation.
Is it even a Dave thing? I would think the state would have jurisdiction
No,
over.
it's, we have jurisdiction over it.
Well, no, I meant from redistributing fuel. I think there's most of the
That is
refueling
true, too.
stations are certified, so,
Just put a lot.
I think the state would take, cause from a location perspective, they usually have screening and other things that need to be there, right, from
Is-
combustibles.
Is
But he
the-
didn't do any of
is the
that.
people that have complained, have they gone to like the state?
We have, but they won't do anything,
Well, at minimum,
because they never filed for a permit for it.
At minimum, if he's operating commercially like that, it's the commercial use in a residential district. And so it's a zoning violation on that basis alone,
Exactly.
notwithstanding any of the safety hazard issues.
Yep. And then that same individual is also installed, he's got some signs on his property. One sign is a 5x5 Shell symbol. And Shell is an actual company that's in business still today. He considers it an antique, but it's not because it's quite large on the side of his building. Plus, he also has a 4x20 Sinclair sign that he considers an antique as well. But that company is also in business, so.
So basically what you're asking is the planning commission to okay Dave to pursue it, but the people still have to sign the complaint.
Yes. Cause Dave won't pursue anything even though there's a complaint, because he wants the board unanimously to tell him to.
That's wrong, the board has
Dave,
no.
Dave,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
what's your side of it, Dave?
Okay, he's wrong about what he said, he's confused a little bit on that. The guy, you know, some people have, antique signs on their garage or whatever, this person does, it's a landscape or decoration. If we start enforcing their landscaping, we can tell everybody, hey, get that off your property, because that's your landscape. We don't enforce landscaping, the guy doesn't have a junk there piled up, it's his antique. And I did tell Todd, I didn't tell Todd to bring that to you, because you guys have nothing to do with this, we shouldn't even be talking about it.
You told me
It's
on the
zoning-
phone, you
what's
told me
that?
on the phone, you told me on the phone that the board has to,
No, you're
Yes, you
wrong
did.
there, you misunderstood.
well, maybe I should
You
take a further
misheard me,
conversation.
because I
with you.
said the zoning board of appeals, you take it to the ZBA, if you look in our zoning book somewhere, it's gonna say if anybody has disagreement about my opinion or how I'm interpreting the zoning, you take it to the ZBA, and that's exactly what I told you, you're confused.
Never heard that.
And I know that's why you said I'm not doing my job,
Well,
because.
I didn't
Wait,
say you're
well,
not doing
because
your
I'm
job.
not enforcing it, not
We're gonna
enforcing it.
drop it, it goes to the ZBA. So,
That's fine.
that, we'll take care of that at the ZBA.
Never heard that.
Anything
I think to
else
the extent that there's a public safety concern, it needs to be addressed.
that needs to go to the ZBA then? Zoning board of appeals.
Excuse me. Why would it go to the ZBA?
Yeah,
What-
that-
What I hear him saying is he would go to the zoning board of appeals for an appeal of his decision or an interpretation of the ordinance. And if the interpretation is, these aren't signs, they're decoration, that's an interpretation issue that belongs with the ZBA. But enforcement of the ordinance, if there's a commercial use in a residential district, it has nothing to do with the ZBA. The zoning administrator is
So Dave, you
responsible
have
for
to-
enforcing.
You have to go ahead and file the complaints against them.
Well, I need to get a complaint sent to me first.
Nobody has sent a complaint to you. Nobody has signed a complaint.
Nobody has, I told
Okay.
Todd, I said, you need to, I mailed him a complaint form, I said, send it to me and I'll look into it, he never did.
Okay.
You never emailed me a form, Dave.
What's that?
You never sent me anything.
I did, Todd.
Well, Dave, send another one
I'll
to
send
Todd so
another
we
one,
can
yeah.
sign it.
Hand it to me today, I'll take it right now.
Yeah,
If the
but people-
complaint form is not on our township website under the forms, the complaint form should be on the township website
Exactly.
under the forms.
This
All right.
takes too long to get that stuff
All
done,
right.
so.
Dave, get him another
Okay, I
complaint
will.
form. Alright, anything else? One thing that Tammy did mention, we need to review the, master plan. We get this, maybe we can start at our next regular meeting, which is scheduled for April. We'll start reviewing the master plan at that meeting.
Question for the point, do we wanna keep moving on momentum for this, and then depending on what they get back to us,
Right.
we could always schedule a
Once-
special meeting prior?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanna make sure I understood the.
And I think the big thing is we wanna get the wind energy systems kinda out of the way, and then we'll start nickel or whittling away at, some of these other items, but, I want Paul to look into the, height and the outbuilding ordinance, what we can do about that, whether we increase the dwelling height, square footage of small homes, and then also dwelling, space in pole barns.
I think we need to look at accessory living spaces as well. I'm thinking of the nanny pad, you know, those types of,
We don't have anything in that regard.
Right.
Table camping back year and a half ago now.
yeah. I think we tried to clean up from all of the people that instead of fixing their houses, were moving trailer houses in. There was that whole big shift. But I think now as our community is getting older, people are, inflation keeps going crazy, it's a lot easier to put,
Well, tiny homes are a great idea, that's, you know,
yeah.
Any other new business? All right, we've got public comment at the end here. Anyone want to, have public comment?
I'll
Way
go.
Back.
Robert Scott, Sydney Township. Couple things, as most of you know, but the new members don't know, I'm a retired real estate development lawyer. I used to show up in front of planning commissions like this to try to get clients' projects developed. I do know a little bit, something about exclusionary zoning. I just pointed out in earlier discussions about, well, these setbacks are gonna make it impossible to put these kind of turbines in your township. Just remember that there's one provision of the statute dealing with exclusionary zoning that says you can defend a claim of exclusionary zoning if there's no location in your township that's appropriate for this use. And it may be because of all the lakes and rivers and other natural features of your township, there is no appropriate place for these industrial grade wind turbines in your township. You can do that. It's up to you, but you can do that. Second of all, I think it'd be very helpful to people who wanna show up to these meetings if you get the next draft of the ordinance on your website. The one that's on the website is several versions old. It's very hard to follow what you're doing without having at least a copy of the draft to see in front of us. And even if it's just a couple of days before your next meeting, you give people a chance to run it off, take a look through it, and be able to follow what you're doing. Last thing, I've got a handout that I'd like to hand out to you. This is some material, an updated version of some material I gave to the board. In this December meeting, it includes a map that shows all the properties